Live and direct, live and a date no jive.
Legalize it.
So how much can a koala bear? Koala bear, koala bear. Koala bear. Barry pulls a joint out of his pocket. Bill says, "Great, Barry, a reefer."
Hi, and welcome back to the Karma Koala podcast. And it's Turkey to the West Coast in this episode. And I'm talking to Ray Allen, who was formerly in-house counsel, the Burning Man, and also was either advised to MAPS or was the GC there. He'll tell me.
At MAPS too.
You were
Yes.
the GC at MAPS, and has now joined Jody at Antithesis. And I just thought, as I've interviewed everybody else at Antithesis, now you've joined. You better join the cult, so to speak.
Sure.
Welcome to the show, Ray. Maybe just a little bit of background about your work as a lawyer. What did you do prior to MAPS, and did you go through the big firm route, or have you always been a solo practitioner?
I did well, first of all, it's great to meet you, Sean, and thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me here. Yeah, I did do the big law thing before Burning Man. I worked at a firm called Arter and Haddon in Los Angeles for a year.
Mhm.
A lot of lawyers do big law for, 5 or 7 years before they go in-house. But I had the pleasure of going in-house after 1 year of working at big law. And so I really, cut my teeth, so to speak, at Burning Man, just sort of on the ground, like learning as I went.
So did you sort of luck out to get out of the firm, and did somebody come to you with the Burning Man thing, or had you been already working on the project?
I was at that big firm in Los Angeles, and that firm imploded. They had some financial issues, and they split up. And the
So
one
you had to
firm,
find something new quickly, yeah?
yeah, I had to find something new. And I had lived in San Francisco before LA, and so I decided I was going to go back to San Francisco and find my dream job. And I had already been going to Burning Man for a number of years. And as soon as I got back to San Francisco, I saw that Burning Man was looking for somebody, and I decided that I needed to get that job because I really believed in what Burning Man was doing and I wanted to be involved in it. And I was a legal department of one for many years. And so I kind of had to learn a lot of the issues on my own. I mean, we had outside counsel who were phenomenal help, but I really
So
enjoyed
when
learning
did you
on my own.
start work there? Was that the early 2000s or before, even before?
I started working there in 2004. So I
Okay.
was there almost 18 years.
And a lot of it probably sounds exciting working for Burning Man, but it's the same as everything else, isn't it? When you're a lawyer, and I presume that a lot of local ordinance excitement.
Exactly. It was both exciting and challenging. Yeah, Burning Man is on federal land that is within the state of Nevada and in the county of Pershing. And there's also a Native American a reservation nearby. So it was really a fascinating intersection of jurisdictional law, federal, state, local, and some tribal. And that it's sort of like what you were just saying. I mean, Burning Man is exciting and there's a lot of art and a lot of things happening and culture and music. But I was really involved in the jurisdictional issues and trying to like figure out which government agency had authority for what and who was overstepping their bounds and who wasn't, and how to keep them within the bounds so that we could keep the color and flavor of the event without having the government sort of overregulate it.
And did you have to deal with any sort of litigation there from attendees or other bodies who didn't like the idea of Burning Man so much?
Yes, we did. Not as much as you would think. For how many people that go and for the type of fun that people have there and the risks involved, there's actually a surprising low number of litigation cases, and I think it's because people sort of go expecting danger and they
Well,
know
I
this
mean, I'm
isn't.
really glad to hear that because in the
Yeah.
no, I'm English, so Glastonbury is our thing. I've never spoken to the lawyers for Glastonbury, but I've never actually seen them have. It's never been public that they've had to deal with anything other than the sort of thing that you're talking about here. And it's quite encouraging to know that people think, if you go to something like this and something goes wrong for you, you don't immediately run to the first lawyer you can find to see if we can get some money out of the organization.
Exactly. There was some of that, but not as much as you would think. And yeah, most of the work really had to do with the government agencies and the attempts at overregulation. And we did end up suing the federal government and Pershing County.
No, I was
And
just reading about that prior
yeah,
to talking to you. So, you were fairly straightforward with them by the sounds of things. So it made them think a little bit harder. Yes.
correct. Yes. Yeah, the Pershing County lawsuit, that went on for about a year and a half, and then we ended up with two settlement agreements with them, a 10-year settlement and a 50-year settlement. And so that was exciting. And basically the outcome of that is that the county agreed not to overregulate the event. I mean,
And
that's kind of the
are you still working with the event?
not so much. A good friend of mine is now the current general counsel, and he calls me every now and then for little things that come up, and I'm always happy to help. But yeah, they're well counseled right now with my friend there.
And was it through them that you got the contacts for maps, or was that a separate thing?
Well, it's a little bit of both. I actually grew up in Bradenton, Florida, which is right next to Sarasota, and that's where Rick Doblin, the founder of Maps, was going to New College. And so when I was going to community college there, I used to go to parties at Rick Doblin's house. And that was when I first learned about Maps. In fact, I graduated from high school in '86, and that was the year that Maps was formed in Sarasota, Florida. And so when I was at one of Rick's parties, I learned about maps. And ever since then, I was a fan. And I would, whenever I would see it in the news, I would read about it. And then many, many, many years later, I was at Burning Man, and Rick Doblin was doing some fundraising at Burning Man, and Burning Man doesn't allow that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we crossed paths there. And then, when I was working for Burning Man, during the pandemic, things got kind of slow. We canceled the event for 2 years in a row, and I was starting to look around to do something else because my job kind of got a little boring during the pandemic. I mean, when you don't have an event and you're an event production
No, I
nonprofit,
know
it's
you always though I've got back into conferences, which I promised myself I'd never do. But of course, then you spend the whole year just working, 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 don't you?
exactly, yeah. So I started looking around, and a good friend of mine was intellectual property lawyer for both Burning Man and Maps, and she told me that Maps, after being around for approximately 30 years, was finally creating a legal department. And I was in shock. I mean, well, I was in shock that they were looking for somebody because it sounded like a dream job. But also, I didn't realize that they had never had a legal department before. And so I was up for the challenge to not only, go in there and be their counsel, but also create the legal department from the ground up, which is not an easy task to do when an organization has been around that long without
Well, I was
one.
about to say that sounds like that sounds rather chaotic to say the least.
It was, but I did the best I could in the short time that I was there.
So, I mean, in terms of the maps, was a lot of it on that Lycos project, or a combination of trying to string everything together? I mean, how's it registered? It's registered as a charity, I presume, yeah?
Yeah, Maps is a 501(c)(3, and
It
when
is
I
a
started
501, yeah.
working there, it owned Lycos 100%.
Yeah.
As so, nonprofit can own a for-profit company. There's certain regulations you have to follow, but it can be done. And it was during that time when Maps was switching its fundraising strategy for MDMA assisted therapies, clinical research. Up until that time, Maps had been just getting private donations from, wealthy donors, and not all wealthy donors, but just from people that were interested in psychedelics. And it was so close to the FDA approval that Maps needed to raise a lot of money really fast, and it couldn't raise enough just from philanthropists. So it decided to spin out the for-profit company and start getting investors in. And so, when a lot of people say, "Oh, what did you do at Maps? Did you work a lot with the psychedelic legal issues?" And I was like, "No, not really.
I was about to say, it's just the same as Burning Man, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
It's people in
yeah,
suits and money, isn't it? A lot, most of it.
exactly. I did a lot of corporate law. I
Yeah.
basically helped Lycos, stay within the legal bounds while it was, owned by a nonprofit, which is highly regulated, and then also getting funding from venture capitalists. And then also the other part of that was basically When I started there, Maps had total control of Lycos, and we changed it so that, Lycos became its own governing entity. And there's pros and cons to that, and I know different people have different opinions, but my personal opinion is that, Lycos was better served at that point in time by being out from under Maps. I think Maps did a great job of cultivating Lycos for many decades, but
Well, I
when it
mean,
came
considering
time,
the
yeah.
result, I would imagine that was the perfect outcome, isn't it? Because
Say
otherwise
that
it might have
again.
taken Maps down with it, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I think in the end, we're now left with two organizations that are each doing its own thing.
Yeah.
Lycos is now
And
taking
those
on the
two really
NBA.
need, I mean, they shouldn't even be running parallel. They are entirely separate things, aren't they?
They
Really?
are entirely separate. And in the beginning, they were in step, and then towards the end, their interests started to diverge, and that's around the time that I worked on the separation, and I'm really proud of that because I think now they're both set up to do what they need to do.
What both are intended to do.
Yeah, correct.
They come, it's evolution, isn't it? I mean, and
Exactly.
certain species have to go off in one direction and certain species have to go off in another. I mean, so what brought you to Jodie and Antithesis, and why did you decide to work with her rather than just saying, okay, most conversations I have with psychedelic lawyers, they are, by their very nature, solo people. Still haven't seen Antithesis is probably the most organized in terms of looking at that idea of a law firm under the umbrella of psychedelic law. But you guys all still work fairly separately. Why did you decide that that umbrella would be a good thing for you?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I had the pleasure of meeting Jody. I guess it was earlier this year in early January. And it was a chance meeting. Like I was helping another lawyer do some work. I have a friend who's an intellectual property lawyer, and she needed some general business law work, and so I was doing that for her. And she asked me to participate in a meeting with another lawyer because they were thinking about merging their firms. And so I was sitting in the meeting, and ultimately those two lawyers decided not to merge firms. But the other lawyer was Jody Green at Antithesis, and she learned that I had been with Burning Man and MAPS, both of which are nonprofits, and that I had a lot of nonprofit law experience. And Jody had some psychedelic clients that were nonprofits, and she needed a lawyer with some nonprofit background. And so, even though that meeting didn't do what it was intended to do for those two lawyers,
It
like
did
it was
something else.
yeah, it was something else. And at the very end of the meeting, Jody was like, "Hey, can I talk to you after the meeting about some other opportunities?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I had already started my own firm, and like you said, I was sort of solo and by myself.
Which
And
is not unusual for people who
no,
decide to practice in psychedelic law. I mean, I'm waiting to see whether it'll actually ever happen. There's a partner type. I don't think it will, and I hope it. Well, not that I hope it doesn't, but it. I think psychedelic law doesn't lend itself to looking backwards. It lends itself to looking forwards, and because half the conversations I have is not so much about having psychedelic law clients. It's about a different way of looking at practicing law. Is that how you're thinking about it?
that's exactly correct. And I think another factor that dovetails with what you were just saying is that psychedelic lawyers aren't in it for the money. They're in it because they believe in the science and the medicine and the spirituality, and they want to do good things in the world. And so that's easy for one person to do by themselves, but to put that in the business model of a law firm that has a
It
lot of
is it well,
fixed costs
it's
and all
not
that,
easy, I should imagine.
yeah, exactly. Now there are firms that are doing that. But the thing that I really liked about Jody was that she seemed to be coming from the same perspective as me with the same values that like she wanted to practice law for helping people and doing the right thing.
And
And
as we know, when you get sucked into corporate law, that's the last thing on people's minds, isn't it?
exactly. And that's why I had always been in-house because, like I left big law, to work for a nonprofit that was doing cool things in the world. And the idea of going back to a law firm, like in some ways seemed sort of backwards to me. But Jody's tagline on her website is, antithesis. Antithesis is the opposite of a law firm. And she really does run it that way. We don't focus on billable hours. We don't focus on like, raising the amount of hours that we
Well, I
bill.
mean,
It's not,
see, this is what I find interesting because
yeah,
at the moment the conversation is AI is changing law. Because I also write a lot about legal knowledge, legal librarianship, that sort of stuff. But I think it's actually you small band of psychedelic lawyers, mainly on the West Coast of the US, who are really reinventing the way that law will and hopefully should be practiced over the next 80 to 100 years. Very, very, very nascent at the moment. But that's every time I have this conversation, that's what I'm feeling in these conversations. I mean,
well,
do
thanks
you
for
feel that
saying that.
do you feel that, I mean, you remember the Psychedelic Bar Association?
I am. Yes.
Do you guys all feel that, or that's not, I hate the words like mission and all that sort of stuff. It all sounds very NASA or very, White
Yes.
House, which we don't want to mention at all at the moment. But it the way that law is being practiced at the moment, wherever you are on the planet, there seems nobody wants to present an alternative except for you merry pranksters.
Yeah, I like hearing that, and thank you. And I'll take it as a compliment. And I do think there's a camaraderie amongst all the psychedelic lawyers, and many of them are on the West Coast, but they're also in New York and Colorado and Texas and other places. And yeah, it's even though there are a lot of solo practitioners, we all sort of have we talk to each other regularly and frequently. So yeah, there is a camaraderie there.
And in terms of the non-profit work you're doing, so I mean, are you looking at a lot of religious freedom rights? Is that you're the main area you're looking at the moment?
I do have some clients that are that qualify as churches and that are involved in psychedelic sacrament. I also have some just regular nonprofits that aren't churches that are, looking to change minds about psychedelics and study psychedelics, similar to MAPS, but on a smaller scale. So yeah, there's both. There's both types of nonprofits.
And what about the regulated sectors, say in Colorado and Oregon, and trying to build that sort of stuff with good compliance? What's your experience of that? Have you got any clients in that area? It seems to be, I wouldn't want to use the word flat at the moment, but the problems haven't really sorted themselves out. And I hear from the outside, I'm outside the country, I'm not talking to the same people as you guys are every day, but it seems that there's a little bit of stasis and people can't quite work out how to move it forward. And that's the businesses, the interlocutors, the lawyers, but also the legislators and the managers within the administrations of the state government. That's how I'm sensing it. I mean, how does it feel
Yeah,
to
no,
you?
that's correct. And it's not just Colorado and Oregon because, ketamine assisted therapy is legal pretty much everywhere. And so, and the legal side of it is similar. It doesn't matter whether it's, psilocybin or ketamine, like the legal issues are very similar. I mean, other than the fact that ketamine is legal and some of the other
Yeah.
ones aren't. But from an assumption of the risk and the waivers and all of that, it's very similar. And so I did some of that work at MAPS and for Lycos too because certainly that legal work was needed in the clinical trials as well, and it translates over to not just clinical trials but also clinical practice. And so I have some clients that I help in that area as well.
And what about the growth of engineered psychedelics, as you're seeing in engineered THC and engineered opiates? It's a huge illegal growth area in the US and in Canada. And I think I just read something about that, the kratom this week that just managed to knock off 5 people somewhere. What do you feel about how that market, for a better term, can be managed? Because obviously the more that is developed there and then sent out to be sold, however, whether it's online or through a gas station, is going to damage the sort of work that you guys are trying to do with therapy and with natural psychedelics or already engineered psychedelics that we know more about, like MDMA and LSD. I mean, is there a discussion about this sort of stuff at the moment? Because science is, like in the cannabis world, science is running away at very high speed, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I mean, when I was a kid, drugs were lumped all into one sort of bucket as bad. And and a lot of that paradigm still remains, and I think a lot of people still view it that way. But the new
But there
paradigm is
were
that
only, say, 5 to 7 things that we knew about that were available. And now there's
they're medicine.
50, now
Yeah.
there, and there's 50, 70, 80. And it goes back to my AI. The more developed people in the underground can learn to use AI to develop things. I mean, we'll see 500, 700 within 36 months, won't we? And
I
unless,
know. I mean,
unless
on the
we
one
learn
hand,
how to deal with that, it's going to be a big problem, isn't it?
I think it will be, and it already is, and it's going to continue to be. And I think, in some ways, we need more regulation to ensure that, the right people are doing that with the right protections and guardrails. On the other hand, who's to say that somebody's not going to be the next Abby Hoffman and just discover something in their backyard chemistry kit that's going to have therapeutic value? And so,
I look at that. And then it's defining which ones do have therapeutic value and which ones don't. And the way that federal government is working at the moment, nobody there. I mean, well, there's no resources and no interest to try and work these issues out. And I presume that the universities don't have the funding either. So the only funding is Wall Street, which I'm always slightly wary of in terms of managing these issues.
yeah, I am too, and I think it's just an area where it's probably going to go both ways. There's going to be some bad outcomes, and hopefully there's going to be some good outcomes. And it's one of those situations where you don't want overregulation, but you do need some. And
It's finding that balance. And is that, I mean,
yeah.
at the association, is that a topic of conversation that comes up a lot? And people are working out, I mean, are you creating commission, bodies and committees to try and think about these things?
Yeah, there's a lot of well, I'm sure you know this. There are a lot of cannabis lawyers and psychedelic lawyers that don't just practice law, they also do lobbying and regulatory work because they are so interrelated and because they are changing so rapidly. And who else is better to push for what's needed than the people that are on the ground doing it, especially when there aren't a lot of them. And so yeah, there's like at MAPS, that's one of the reasons why I actually didn't work a lot with the regulatory side is because MAPS already had a bunch of people doing that. And MAPS is doing a lot of that still. And it frees up, it
And
makes
those
things
guys
easier.
at Harvard still doing a lot of that as well?
I'm not sure. I'm not that familiar, but to be honest, yeah.
Yeah. And in terms of the way that you're thinking in the US, do you have a global outlook for psychedelic law, psychedelic legal practice, or is it really so nascent that you're running to keep up with what's happening in the States at the moment?
It's a little bit of both. MAPS was involved in some clinical trials in other countries, and so some countries have laws that are similar to the U.S., and some have ones that are more strict, and some have ones that are more lax. But the real issue is, the movement of the drug itself. Like if a country has favorable psychedelic laws and they have access to their own psychedelics, that's one thing they have favorable psychedelic laws and they don't have psychedelics and they need to get them from another country, that's a whole complicated ball of wax. And
Understatement
so
of the century.
yeah, I mean it's basically, moving drug around is not something that's easy to do legally.
And the other thing before we go is I've been following a lot with these fun guys in Canada. I mean, it's like whack-a-mole essentially. What are your thoughts about? I mean, the main part of the conversation is legal psychedelics are for therapy, and anybody who's used psychedelics, just like anybody who's used cannabis, is these things can be a lot of fun as well. And how how do we start the conversation to walking away from a rather Protestant ethic about having fun because you put something in your system is not a good thing, so we can have as we do with cannabis in most states in the US now, some sort of regulated retail approach to allowing adults to access a range of psychedelics.
Yeah, I think it's a parallel path with both of those things. I mean, certainly since, psychedelics were first discovered by ancients or, whoever, people have been interested in mind expanding and mind altering and, spirituality and some recreation as well. But also the science of it is really progressing very rapidly in currently as, in our time. And so these things are moving forward on parallel paths. And they're separate, but I also think they relate to each other because if
Well, yeah,
somebody,
one always incurs the other, but I mean, yeah, when you're
yeah,
young,
yeah,
when you're young, the fun thing is the main part of it. As you get older, you realize fun also can equal a range of other ways of looking at it. Is, I mean, it's an absolute nightmare for legislators to try and work out how to deal with, isn't it?
it is. But I do think that, if any legislatures had that experience, like while they were in college and it, did something positive for them, they're going to be more likely to, to vote for it or change policy, change regulation.
So, do you think you're going to have a very busy and large firm in 25 years' time, or will you just stick to I'm going to do this by myself? I'll keep myself busy, and hopefully more people will come on and take on this growing. I hate to use the word market or I psychedelics. So I don't think there is a word for it. It's just it's a something, isn't it?
Well, it is growing, and we are a small firm, but Jody just brought on another lawyer as well, and I think
Yeah,
it will
I
continue.
wasn't aware of that. Who else is joining the firm?
Jessica, I'll have to get you her last name, but yeah, you can talk to Jody. Yeah, maybe
Okay, I
she's your
will.
next victim.
Well, I hope you're not feeling like a
No,
victim.
I'm kidding. This has been
Yeah,
a
yeah.
pleasure.
I
Absolute
mean,
pleasure.
I'm just fascinated by the top, psychedelics and Lloyd's. When I was young, I never thought I'd be able to have this conversation in my lifetime. I was thinking it was going to be something that was beyond my lifetime. So I'm really excited to talk to people who say, yeah, I practice law and psychedelics or psychedelic law. Or, yeah, it's a fantastic conversation to be having, isn't it?
It is, and I love that you do this, and I love the other podcasts that I listen to that you've done as well.
Well, thank you very much, Ray, for being on the Karma Koala up the tree with us, as I like to say, chewing on the eucalyptus, and definitely when you've done a bit more work with Jody and there's a bit more water under the bridge. I'd love to have you get back and talk about how these things are progressing, because I do like to record these as moments in time. Because I do, one of my things I always say, and this is with the cannabis as well, is a lot of this sort of conversation and knowledge in the past has been sort of buried, and then you find it in an old book in a secondhand bookshop, but it's never current and identified. So other